Chapter 4: Common Portfolio Policies of Defensive Investors. The basic characteristics of an investment portfolio are usually determined by the position and characteristics of its owners. An old principle states that those who are not willing and able to bear risk must be satisfied with a relatively low rate of return on their investments. This principle leads to the idea that an investor's desired rate of return should be roughly equal to the level of risk he or she can afford. Graham, however, thinks differently. According to him, the target rate of return should depend on the level of intelligence the investor is willing and able to apply to his investment strategy. The minimum return will be received by passive investors who want security and freedom from fear, while the maximum return will be obtained by active investors who are alert and courageous and use all their intelligence and skill in investing. To determine the aggressiveness of your portfolio, Graham says you should start by determining what kind of investor you are, not what kind of investments you have. There are two ways to become a smart investor. 1. Constantly research, select, and monitor the dynamic mix of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. 2. Create a permanent portfolio that works on its own without any further effort. If you have a lot of time on your hands, are competitive, think like a football fan, and enjoy complex intellectual challenges, then the active approach is for you. On the other hand, if you're always pressed for time, want convenience, and don't want to think about money, then the passive approach is a good fit for your investment strategy. In this chapter, Graham begins to discuss how a portfolio is appropriate for an investor who wants to be passive. According to Graham, the defensive portfolio policy is very simple and clear, namely that defensive investors should divide their funds into two types of investment instruments, namely high-quality bonds and high-quality common stocks. Graham also suggests that defensive investors should never hold less than 25% or more than 75% of their funds in common stocks. This means that the maximum value of the common stock portion of the defensive investor's fund is 75%, and the remaining 25% is the bond portion, or vice versa. The maximum value of the bond portion of the defensive investor's fund is 75%, and the remaining 25% is the common stock portion. An investor can also divide his funds between the two investment instruments with an equal share of 50% for each, by increasing or decreasing one portion, depending on market conditions. For example, investors may increase the percentage of their investments in stocks when the market is bearish, so that many stocks are offered at low prices, or reduce the percentage of stock holdings when the market is in bullish conditions, indicating that the stock price is already too high and dangerous. The same is true for bond percentages. Investors can perform analyses that allow for changes in the percentage structure of the two investment instruments in light of market conditions, with the caveat that such changes do not make the investor's portfolio completely 100% stocks or 100% bonds. Once again, Graham emphasizes that a wise investor who chooses to be a defensive investor in his investments should keep a rational mind and stay away from the hustle and bustle of the market. While most ordinary investors act by selling and selling their stocks when the market is bearish and buying when the market is bullish, the wise investor should stick to what are called the general rules in this book, which are to sell their stocks when the price is too high and the risk is greater, and to buy or increase their stock load when the price offered is far below the fair price. Graham also advises never to hold more than 75% of your total assets in stocks. Perhaps for some people it is justifiable to have 100% of their funds in stocks. But for those of you who honestly believe that bear markets are always scary and that you don't have enough money set aside to support you and your family for a year or more, don't even think about investing with this approach. Because anyone who panicked in the last bear market will panic in the next bear market and will regret not having other assets as a safety net. The next chapter discusses defensive investors and common stocks.